Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, excited.
It's gonna be fun.
Awesome. How's your April going so far?
It's amazing.
Good.
How about you?
Good. It's like better weather. I'm in Oregon, so better weather and everyone's in a great mood and yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing when the weather changes
Yeah, like
from, you know, yucky to good, and it plays a big part at the end of the day. So,
yeah, exactly.
absolutely. Okay, so I think I can do it this way. Nope. I think what I'm gonna do is this. Whoops. Okay, here we go. Can you see that? Oh, hang on. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. And it always swaps them. It's so funny. All right. So we have, I think we had like 22 folks registered in the event on Zoom, and we had 106 in the LinkedIn event. So lots of follow up there, which will be really nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot of good traction, right? And I think this is it's a timely and relevant topic. And I feel like the topic of coaching has been around for a while, but I feel like it's been like circling.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I still feel like it's such an important thing to talk about, but not quite there yet.
Yeah, getting there, but yes.
Getting there,
So,
yeah.
I hear ya. Awesome. We've got 7 folks with us. Hi, everybody. We hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining us. You're hearing Michael and I shooting the breeze on coaching, right? And so we look forward to hearing from all of you for sure today and just appreciate you joining us. It is the top of the hour. So we're going to go ahead and get started for all of us that are on time and able to leave one Zoom meeting or one previous engagement
For the
and
next.
come to the next one, right? Just a full disclosure, this meeting is being recorded. This discussion is being recorded. We will send out the playback for you. It'll be available in the LinkedIn event invite. You'll see it in an email format. It might come from Michael and Chili Piper. So plenty of opportunity to see and hear this amazing content all over again. So thank you for joining us. I'm Dionne Mejer, founder of Inside Sales by Design, as well as salesclass.ai, and a huge believer in coaching. And Michael is amazing and one of the most awesome people on the planet. And he and I were chatting and we were talking about, hey, we should have a discussion about coaching and put it out there. And we had this amazing pre-conversation, which led to what you are experiencing today. So Michael, thank you so much for joining and talking about this topic. And I think putting into place tactical pieces for people to embrace. So thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here, and obviously it's like the one topic in the world I'm most passionate about. So, yeah, super excited. And yeah, it was great having that conversation with you previously. And it was like, let's just have that conversation with other people as well, and kind of broaden that up. So I'm super excited to be here today.
Yeah, thank you. And again, it's one of those things where I think the word coaching evokes emotion for people, right? And we're going to dive into that, which is super funny. And maybe some people feel like it's work, or they don't know how to do it, or they don't know where to start, and all that good stuff. So we're going to dive into the what, the why, and the how, and hopefully provide some good nuggets for folks. And definitely, as we're going through this, please put your questions in the chat. We're going to talk about all of these pieces, what it is and why do we do coaching and how do we do it at the end of the day, right? And it's really all about the execution, right? And so it's an interesting dynamic when we start talking about putting in place best practices, whether it's coaching, teaching your kids to brush their teeth twice a day. Why is it important? Walking the dog, getting your team onboarded. The why is just as important as everything else. Execution trumps just about darn near anything. So, and high performing teams continually progress, they continually evolve, and sometimes it's a mess and sometimes it's super organized. Michael, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that first, I think it's important to get started at the ground level. So, like something I typically hear is like, oh, I'll wait till I'll postpone, I'll do it in the future. But I think that you really need to get started right now. If you're not doing it, this should be the coaching is and always has been the focal point of everything we do in my role at Chili Piper, but as a sales leader as well. And so if you're not doing it today, it is that driving force of execution. Specifically, we've all heard the stories like, oh, like when I was a sales rep, I got the yellow pages and I was told to go sell, right? And you really shouldn't be doing that in a modern selling environment, but we still are doing things like that. We just call them by different names. We call them lead IQ, we call them Zoom info, right? It's the same concept where we give them the data tools, we give them the revenue number, and then we leave people to their own devices to be able to like figure it out. And then we have performance plans and all sorts of different things that really aren't motivating. The number one thing that people tell me in an interview is why they're leaving their job. You could probably guess is they're not growing. It's not because of a lack of ping pong tables when we were in the office, or it's not a lack of free lunch that their company provided, or this people have a fundamental need for feedback, improvement, novelty and learning, all of these things that coaching really encompasses and drives home, and the execution piece is very important to that as well. But the coaching is really what brings all of that together, and really coalesces around the idea of employee growth. So you can't have a conversation with coaching separate from employee growth, which then touches people operations and employee engagement, and now we're having a much bigger conversation than just revenue. One of my favorite things about coaching is if you track coaching against how much feedback someone is getting against things like retention and attrition metrics, it is absolutely insane what you will find. So there was one time, I'll just say real quick, I was working in an industry with SDRs that were very high churn. Like you would expect to lose all your SDRs by the end of the year. And at the end of that first year, I retained 90% of those SDRs. And that's not a tooting their own horn thing. It's really the emphasis on the coaching as the star of the show. And because of the coaching, those retention metrics are so much better. I think this is applicable to any industry, to any selling environment, not even sales. Like what if marketing was better at coaching? What if engineering was better? The ramifications of it are so powerful. So those are a couple of thoughts off the top of my head.
I love it. And we're going to dive into definitely most of that today. And this is a good time to let's take just the proverbial step back. And Michael, please tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background and your role at Chili Piper, which is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. So it was really born out of a conversation with our CEO. My title is Director of Revenue Performance. I think he and peers like thought I wanted to be on the track to become a VP of sales, which I expressed I just didn't want to do that. And instead, I said, I really kind of want to carve my own path and really kind of figure out what that looks like. I really enjoy kind of working on special projects for the company, based on kind of needs at the time. And then the other component to that is I really, really love this idea of coaching and training and really serving the employees of the company, especially on the revenue teams, through coaching and training. So I own all of the coaching and training for chili piper, but it touches a lot of other different departments and things like that as well. So that's the primary function of my job.
I love that. So, quick question for everybody. How many of you or who else has a director of revenue performance? And the words revenue performance tied together are so perfect, and just definitely speak volumes at the end of the day, which is nice. And so, to that point, we talk about what is coaching. And Michael, you touched on this for sure previously. Coaching is a verb, right? And so, not to take everybody back to English class, right? But coaching is a verb that implies action. And so, I agree with you where so many times, and again, put it in the chat, everybody, how many of us have, if you've led teams or even been part of a team where you're going, hey, I would really like feedback to know what I'm doing. It's not a lack of perks, right? It's like the spoiled kid who has everything but doesn't have attention from his or her parents, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
the same concept. We are human beings and we want interaction. And so, not going to read everything here because, again, Michael touched on it in his really eloquent statement previously. It's the art of making others better. It's how do we get people to perform the best? And it's to give instruction. And which, again, just what is coaching? When Michael and I were talking before, we wanted to level set, and sometimes we think, man, I don't know how to coach or I don't know what to coach and so on and so forth. Coaching is providing instruction. Coaching isn't back in the day, in my day, I had to do X, right? There's a place and time for storytelling, but that's storytelling, not instructing. So, Michael, how would you define what is coaching? What would you add to this?
Yeah, I think coaching when I think about it and when I'm kind of planning out my coaching sessions and when I'm doing all that, I'm really thinking about how can I get this person to that specific next rung of performance. And so when I'm singularly focused like that, it helps me both in my coaching philosophy. Like my coaching philosophy is to help elevate people in their careers. Then on a very practical level, right before I go into a one-on-one, if I'm thinking about that, I'm like, what is this singular issue that I can focus on at this moment in time that will get this person to that next step of where they need to be? And then I hold it there until they get that step down. I think like one of the things with coaching that we need to work on as sales leaders is we say, oh, when I was a sales rep, we did this, this, and this, and then you inundate people with feedback, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you either do too much or you do too much emulation as well. Like, especially we're guilty of this when you're in the office, right? We don't have this luxury of emulation as much now that everyone's outside of the office. When you're in the office, it's really easy to say, and a little bit of a lazy, like, let's call it what it is, to say, oh, go copy what the top performer is doing.
Right.
Well, in a remote context, you can kind of still do that, but not really. You really have to focus on like when one person is struggling with X, they can't just plug and play what someone is doing and expect like the same results like overnight. Are there things that you can learn? Absolutely. Are there things that you can borrow? 100%, and we all do. However, what's more interesting is when you figure out what is it specifically that Dionne can work on? What is it that Michael can work on specifically? Dionne's really good at objection handling. Michael has the discovery down like Pat. So why am I going to put everyone through a cookie cutter coaching process or a cookie cutter training process if people fundamentally have different things? So so I think that's a big part of the conversation that we're starting to have, especially in this remote context. And it's fascinating to see. We had a Fortune 500 company the other day tell our CEO, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see that in this remote context, everyone's performance has gotten better. Well, I think a lot of this is because it's reframing how you have to like coach and train your employees and really making sure that they're properly enabled.
Absolutely. And you were saying so many very, very interesting words. What is my plan to help this person specifically? Right.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes, and this is why we wanted to level set on the definition of what is coaching. And coaching is to provide instruction. And we
Exactly.
can't provide instruction if we have ambiguity. And I don't like ambiguity to begin with. Nothing good happens. Right. So
Yeah.
to your point, you're having a plan, you have a philosophy. And so it's really kind of the know thyself in order to help others, which is really, really interesting. And so we talked about what is coaching. What coaching is providing instruction and being specific with that instruction in order to get the person to the next level, right? To the next rung of whatever their career is. And so now we're going to talk about why do we do coaching? So in the what component of it, we have to think about what are we doing? We're providing instruction.
Hmm.
Okay. And within providing that instruction, we need specific things and specific skill sets and specific steps people need to take in order to achieve this next level, right? And then we want to talk about why. Because most human beings, we need to understand why, right?
Hmm.
We need to understand, okay, I'm going to do this, but what's in it for me? And I mean that in the nicest possible way. But Michael, talk a little bit about this too, because you had some really interesting thoughts on all of this when we were talking before.
Yeah, absolutely. To back up 1 second with your comment on ambiguity. So I think that that is really important to kind of address because I see that a lot in sales
Yeah.
coaching where,
Yep.
I can remember when I was an SDR, it was like 10 years ago, and this manager kept walking around and he was like, just add value, just add value.
What
And
does
like
that
I was
mean?
exactly. It was like, what does that mean? And then you see it on LinkedIn, you see it, there's nothing wrong with it if people understand what it means. However, if I have since been doing sales for 10 years and I still don't know what it means. So I think that it's really, when we're communicating, we think we're being really precise. We think other people can latch on to our ideas. When I hear things like that, it's a bit of a red flag because it's not specific enough. That's a perfect example of why you cannot have ambiguity in your coaching and why it needs to be specific. Okay, break that down. What does adding value mean? What is it that they said that they could have said that could have been different? How can I role play this exercise so that I can build up this skill so that it doesn't that you can build the skill around it so it doesn't happen again. So the ambiguity piece is really important. I would just say to break that down. As yeah,
Go ahead.
as far as the why we do it. I just like love this so much because even like imagine if you were in a one-on-one, right? A lot of sales leaders are like, "Oh, go do this." Why? Oh, because I said so. Not really that powerful. If people understand, if I as a sales leader first understand why you were doing it that way, and then I say, okay, and I give the explanation of why I'm kind of recommending another thing. It's much more powerful because just like you said, there's a fundamental human need there for the human brain to be able to understand why. Prospects need to understand why you're asking them questions, right? If you barrage them with a million discovery questions and they have no idea why you're asking those questions, you're not going to get that. This goes all the way back to, influence, like the basics of sales here, right? Like people need to have a reason to understand like why they're taking that action.
Yeah.
And so if you help people to understand that literally in your one-on-one coaching, that it's all tied back to that. It's super important. If on the other end, you're trying to get institutional buy-in, right? Like why should I have an entire role focused on coaching and training, right? Like that was a sale that I had to do,
Right.
right? Why is it? What's the ROI there? How is it important? The thing about coaching is when you do it and do it properly, you see results really fast. Sales is one of the things that revenue is a lagging indicator. So if there's a problem with the revenue, you need to go way back to see like what the causes of those deficiencies are. Coaching, however, is one of those things that you're able to rectify the revenue as a lagging indicator, and because of that causal relationship, your results will get better much
Mhm.
faster. Now, granted, factor in your ACV and your sales cycle and things like that. But generally speaking, you can see the results really quickly. So it should be easy for you to make the case internally for why this is so important when you're trying to get buy-in from directors, VPs, your CEO and founding team. So that's a critical component here as well. but it's really important in this idea of people development and skills development. In most of our lives, we have all had a lot of this go find knowledge, like remember on the test and then forget about it later, right? Sales is could not be more different, right? 20% is winning in sales, right? We always strive for that 100%, when we're in school. And so this idea of building a skill that's everlasting is so important, and it's not something that you can do overnight. And so when you're in the business of people and skills development, I don't know a more powerful why, than that personally.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree with that. And being able to really be other centered thinking, right? So sometimes as a sales leader or for a coach in any way, shape, fashion, or form, we get tired and lazy too. And that's us being human. I don't mean that from a critical perspective. I
Mhm,
mean that we need to be honest with ourselves and give ourselves some grace at the end of the day. However, if we signed up to be in the roles we are and we need to be able to coach and provide feedback, then we should try to figure out how to set ourselves up in a system that we can do that and do that well at the end of the day, because it's all about improving people. And so we talked about what is coaching, which is instructing. We talked about why we do it, which is to make others better. And in turn, we tend to make ourselves better the more we give good, specific coaching and feedback, right? And again, Michael, I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation that revenue is a lagging indicator. It's a
mhm,
result.
mhm,
And coaching can get people out of their head.
mhm,
And because what we think determines how we feel, and how we feel determines our action. And so if in our head we're stuck in neutral, I feel stuck in neutral, I'm going to call in sick today and I'm going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix and eat ice cream all day. That's how that works. Whereas if I feel pretty good, I feel like I can tackle these things, I feel in my head, I think I have the ability and the capability to do the things and the right tools, I feel good. And when I feel good and like I can do these things, I start acting like it. So we want to definitely dive into the what, we want to dive into the why. And now we're going to talk about the how.
mm.
So, huge fan of crawl, walk, run. And please note, in the walk section, it says, this is weeks, not months. And so the world is moving faster than ever. We've heard that before. People want feedback. There's a lot of reasons for it, right? We access to news media, the way the world is working, so on and so forth. We're simply consuming a lot of information. It doesn't mean our rhythms have to be fast, but it does mean that we need to progress and evolve probably at a quicker pace, which means we have to be mentally present.
Mhm.
So we want to crawl, we want to walk, and then we want to run. So, Michael, can you talk a little bit about kind of the iterative process of putting a how to do coaching in place?
Absolutely. Um, so when I find like people, kind of as a segue from the last
Yeah.
section, when a lot of sales leaders aren't doing this, often find like a little bit of fear, and it's this idea of like expecting themselves to be like all knowing, and so they don't jump into it and things like that. But I love what you said, because it's like the sales leader learns just as much, if not more, than the people on the sales team, and then you're able to take those learnings and scale them as the company grows. So I just want to comment on that real quick.
Mhm.
Then from the how part, the in terms of crawl, walk, and run, um, the crawling phase doesn't necessarily have to be where you are at a stage of company, right? It could be, it's the process of implementing coaching, or getting it to be in an optimal and really robust state.
Yes.
So I was giving a talk in 2019, and there's a ton of people in the room, and I said, like, raise your hand if you are like listening to your calls regularly. And a decent amount of them raise their hand. And then I said, okay, now raise your hand if you're scoring those calls. And there's tons of people in this room, and only one other person like raise their hand. And so something as simple as scoring your calls with some of the top tech talent in the world were in that room in terms of like they were SDR leaders. And they weren't doing something as simple as like creating a scoring system. And it might sound like, oh, well, I don't need to do that. But the simple concept is if you don't have an agreed upon scaled out way where everyone can, score something on an agreed upon criteria, what are those indicators? Before we're talking about revenue as a lagging indicator, what are those original indicators that actually cause the revenue to improve? And if we don't know what those things are, it's really hard to influence the revenue. So something like as simple as like creating a framework or something to score your calls off of, and then tweaking it to make sure over time that those indicators actually do end up resulting in revenue. So that's something we spent a lot of time on in the beginning of the company, was figuring out um, like a scoring system for all of our processes. That's
Yeah.
thing that's thing number one. Thing number two is you talked a little bit about getting like the manager kind of in the habit and overcoming our own procrastination and things like that. The way that I do that is just very simple. It's with calendaring and
Yeah.
scheduling. So I'll go over my schedule real quick with the crawl piece. So what I do is I have just coaching sessions. So I don't go over if
Okay.
they need additional help on pipeline, I'll go over that. But I'll leave a lot of that to our VP of sales or their manager to go over with them. But our sessions are really focused on skill improvement and skill building. And that's all I focus on. So maybe pipeline comes into that meeting, but most of the time it's what we call demo management. So for AEs, anyways, like making sure that they can run the demo and build those skills there. That, there's people I've been working on just on that for multiple years. So my schedule, I have one-on-ones with each of them. These days I mostly meet with managers in terms of scaling the coaching and training in the company. The second thing that we do is that's really important is we have a weekly sales training, and it's not, oh, here's my process, go do it, which you hear at a
Mhm.
lot of companies. It's on a multitude of different topics that we bring in. So I also have like a peer-to-peer model that we've adopted here that I really like, because when people are involved in a process, they're more likely to adopt the things that you're trying to get them to do, right? If it was me teaching or speaking every single week, it would be a little bit more difficult to get the buy-in and more specifically that peer involvement. And so I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to create it more of an ecosystem. So where if I wasn't here, that they would be able to do it on their own and not like everything needs to come from me and that's just the way it is. So we have these two things that are kind of mutually reinforcing. They have the one-on-ones with me, and then they also have weekly sales training. So I've had SDRs lead on how to do a multi-channel approach to
Mhm.
prospecting, personalization. We've read books as a company, and then had two people lead the training on that. With here's my favorite part about that is they would take the book that we read and then they would make it Chili Piper. So we read Never Split the Difference,
Yeah.
and then we broke down every chapter and made the specific examples that you could have done. And we made it Chili Piper. So it was really easy to digest mentally. So it wasn't, oh, we're going to have a book club. It wasn't about that. It was, we're going to read the book and we're going to build these skills. Another book we did that with was Persuasion. Someone else presented on the world class customer service with the book Setting the Table, and a million other topics that weren't books as well. It's just the examples I'm giving.
Yeah.
And that was way more powerful than any sales leader. Sales leaders present all the time, but it's not just sales leaders or VPs or things like that. So those are a couple structural things that we do.
Yeah. And I think the overarching principle that I hear too is the effort that goes into it and the systemization, and which is super important, right? So there's not a lot of there's no ambivalence at the end of the day, number one. And number two, it really ties to the belief that coaching works. And so talking about how do we do it? So if you are doing coaching, that's great. I think based upon some of what you're hearing today, you can kind of look at yourself and grade yourself, right? Are there things that you're doing that are working? Are there things that you're doing that aren't? And you can maybe tweak a few things, which would be ideal. If you're not doing coaching, starting at a version one that says, okay, we're going to establish a coaching rhythm, putting a structure in place. When I work with clients, we talk about doing a monthly schedule. So there's always an initial onboarding. And then, Michael, to your point, we'll say, okay, each month you take a topic.
Hmm.
And within that topic, so maybe it's pre call planning or opening the call or asking questions. And then every week for that topic is a different learning modality.
Hmm.
So whether it's peer to peer, reading a book, reading an article, doing teach backs, listening to phone calls,
Yep.
but you want to have that evolution where as a sales leader, you're empowering your team to self-drive their improvement and own it. It's the same thing as homework, right? My professors in college weren't sitting there with me when I was writing a paper. That would be
Hmm.
ridiculous.
Hmm.
It's that
Hmm.
same concept. And so you want to have a version one that says, hey, we're establishing, we're going to do coaching. Here's the rhythm, here's a system. And then version two is, as a leader, you might have to kind of get it going and push it a little bit. However, our job as leaders is to be consistent, establish that rhythm, have a skills breakdown, chart it out.
Hmm.
If people are freaked out on a numbering thing, do red, yellow, green. How are
Exactly.
you doing on opening your call? Right now, it's a
Yeah.
red because you're getting hung up on.
Yeah.
Let's move it to a
Exactly.
yellow. How do we get it to a yellow? Peer to
Exactly.
peer scorecards, and then you can kind of move into a version three. So, really, again, getting specific into coaching works. There's no doubt about it. Look at professional sports, coaching works, right?
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
you want to be able to tie all of that together. So, think about it too from that versioning perspective, because we all have 1,000 things going on and we can't tackle everything at once. So we're going to eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yep.
Michael, thoughts on this?
I completely agree. So I try to meet with like sales leaders a lot and just kind of get a pulse for what they're thinking. I get tons of different answers on this topic specifically. But and last year I asked a couple people. I said like, "What do you do if someone isn't performing?" Which, by the way, is a great interview question you can steal for me and use in your interviews. To see like how someone will behave in that way. And many people who are not sophisticated enough will say, who are VPs of sales, by the way, or revenue leaders, will say, "Oh, well, I'll just tell them go back to the process." Right. And you really want to like get out of the like, yes, you have your sales process. Yes, that's important. But what that tells me is that it communicates a lack of granularity of coaching that's really kind of missing. Like even what you just said, Dion, like all of those things are hyper specific, hyper actionable, like
Yeah.
so important to improve upon that like you don't always get from sales leaders. And but a lot of people kind of view sales this way as it's this broad stroke,
Great.
spray and pray, like one size fits all. And it's because that this more sophisticated style of coaching takes more work. And it
One.
takes a lot more thought that goes into it to break it down because they need to be reading books themselves. They need to be practicing these things themselves. Not that a sales leader needs to be the best salesperson, they need to have like theories themselves and things like that. So whenever I hear these broad stroke answers, it's a red flag for me. So I would just it's something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I agree with you on that 100%. And it kind of goes back to knowing yourself, right? As a leader, what are you good at?
Mhm.
And then if you're good at painting the vision and not necessarily good at those tactical granular pieces, then make a case to hire a coach, a director of revenue performance, right?
Mhm.
So you need to be able to we need to be able to provide these teaching levers to our teams at the end of the day. And this is what you're looking at now is a slide and kind of a checklist, right? Of if you are looking to start a coaching program or you already have one, and we'll send out, we made an ebook out of this, so we'll send you the ebook. So you have it. And again, just kind of grade yourself on it. Do you have scorecards? Are you able to, you know, follow the sales process? Well, is your sales process defined? In stage one, we do this. In stage two, stage three, you don't have to have seven. You can have four. So
Mhm.
it's just a matter of giving the specificity and the clarity so you can coach to it and people know what to do, right?
Exactly.
We call it putting lines on the road. If your team doesn't have any lines on the road, they can't go anywhere. They're all over the place, right? They're like overheated molecules. So how do we put lines on the road and give our team specificity at the end of the day?
Exactly.
Anything to add to this, Michael?
Well, and then coaching also serves as a net.
Yeah.
So if you have those lines in the road, to use your analogy, but do people feel like they can raise their hand and say, "I don't know. I'm afraid. I'm scared. I don't know how. How do I do this?" Right? And that it's we're all human. Those things come up, especially when you're a new employee, right? Or when you become a tenured employee and you need to go back to the basics, right? So the coaching also serves as a net for catching these other issues where like, well, if something's preventing someone from doing something, you can catch it, diagnose it in coaching, remove that obstacle from that person's day, provide the education needed. One of my favorite things to do on that is like remove the obstacle, but then provide a resource where that obstacle was. That is maybe not this, everyone needs to read X book, right? Right. I would tell everyone to read Never Split the Difference. That was one of the books I mentioned earlier. But if a certain salesperson was struggling with like presentation skills, so I gave them the book Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs, and then a storytelling book specific to that person. That's a 4 hour Audible listen, and it worked. Like the person got better at that specific thing. So I love that kind of that tailored approach, and also thinking as coaching as a net to pick things up that you might not otherwise get.
Yeah. Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And so what we're going to finish out our time together showing just some super basic actionable things. So this is a super basic scorecard. I did this in Excel and just the weeks down there. We talk about the prep, open, asking questions, close and follow up, and then putting in some specifics there. You can start with something as basic as this, and again, on a scale of 1 to 10 or red, green, yellow, and what you have over the course of a couple months is a visual representation,
Hmm.
which is exactly what everybody needs, right? And then you end up tying it to comp and things of that nature and progression and career planning and things of that nature. And so, as we've been discussing during our time together, talking about where are you at on the coaching spectrum? If you're a leader or even somebody who's in a position of influence, what does that coaching look like? Again, I think, Michael, you nailed it where you were talking about what philosophy or what is my coaching philosophy? What is my plan?
Yep.
And you as a leader have that authenticity, right? Are you somebody where it's, I'm going to sit back and ask questions versus, again, I think sometimes as leaders, like, oh my gosh, I have to have all the answers. Well, that's not
Yep.
true. We do need to be able to do is lead people through a process, right? Lead
Yeah.
people through a breakthrough. So where are you at on the coaching spectrum? Are you going to do coaching? The short answer should be yes. Establishing your rhythm, communicating your goals, what is the why, and then rolling out the tools. So, Michael, thoughts on next steps?
Yeah, so I would just say, like, come up with a simple, our first scorecard is just like 3 line items, and we still use it today. Like, it's super simple. We'll listen to a section of a call, or we'll listen to an entire call, and we'll score it on those 3 things, and then we'll have, like, a really cool discussion on why we assign the scores, and it creates awareness. And over time, the salesperson score gets closer to mine, and that's when you're, for us, that's when we know we're in, like, a good place, when we have that alignment and mutual understanding. That coachability piece is it's not just about us providing coaching, but the salesperson being coachable. And we know that that receptivity to feedback is also really important. No one can get to extreme heights on their own. You can't do it. It's impossible. Every athlete, every person, everyone has that other person who is there to kind of view them from that third party and see where the gaps are and then help fill those gaps and elevate their performance.
Mhm.
That's why coachability, that's one of the things I measure in hiring, right? This is a hallmark of our company culture. So that coaching starts in pre-onboarding. It starts in the interview, right? It starts pre-interview because we market ourselves as a place where you come to get coaching and training. So now I have people are queued up through like how we market ourselves to come to us for coaching and training, set that dynamic up, and then it goes all the way through their entire life cycle as employees. So I would think about some of these things a little bit because people really are motivated by these intrinsic
Yeah.
versus extrinsic motivators. And so I would think about that.
Yes.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, and it sounds like we should do a topic on hiring.
let's do it.
Which I agree. Oh, and so again, Michael and I were talking, we're big fans of of giving. And so this is a worksheet from Inside Sales by Design. We talk about, what is the annual plan? So if you're a leader, what do you need to start doing and stop doing? And are you going to start coaching and all that good stuff? And give yourself a theme for the year. We talk about that all the time. Do you have a personal professional mission statement? It's the thoughtfulness and the awareness. So Michael, I love that word that you use, right? Just the awareness of it. Otherwise, we're just floating through day
Yeah,
after after year without an actual destination and goal in mind at the end of the day.
yeah.
And so thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that the awareness exercise for the employer and the leader and the salesperson alike is critical. I almost see this lack of curiosity of like what does it take to drive revenue, right? Like I even heard like a revenue leader speak or in a former salesperson speak sort of condescendingly about this. You can't wave a magic wand and we all know how hard it is, right? You can't wave the magic wand. Here's your revenue. It's very difficult to do. The best companies in the world though, they're all doing this, right? They're all aside from the ones that just hit that market fit and it's all product led, which is extremely rare. Like regardless of that, all of the top companies are doing this, and it's becoming more important. And I think a real reason for that is buyers can feel like what it's like working with someone who was coached to
Yes.
be centered and focused on them versus someone who is focused on themselves.
Mhm.
And it really boils down to this concept like, are you being buyer centric or are you being self-centered in your sales approach? And buyers can pick up on that in an instant, right? And when people are searching the internet and there's all sorts of different competitors and it's so easy to go to the next person, that is 100% what they will do if you are not coaching and training your salespeople to be that customer centered, highly skilled. Because of all this competition, it's forcing salespeople to elevate their game, to up their game, to have to read books, to have to educate, to have to understand psychology, to have to
Mhm.
understand the nuances of their market, right? Gone are the days of here's the yellow book and I'm just going to cold call it because I have there was an information asymmetry before the internet and the sales person had all the information, right? That asymmetry is now gone and it has shifted in favor of the buyer. And we as sellers need to shift with that.
Very, very well said. Completely agree with you on that. And we live in the experience economy. And
Mhm.
so we need to be hyper aware of that as well and do the work to be good at what we do, to be other centered thinking. Because, man, we've all been on both sides of that fence, right? So you're just like, wait a minute, what just happened here? So
Exactly.
we don't want that. And in the day of reviews and, the internet and everything else, like we need to be aware of and
Exactly.
be willing to come at it with a humble heart, just full of humility, and put our ego aside and really know we can serve people. And if we can't, that's okay too, right? So let's just be good at what we do, and we can do that through coaching and being specific and having a plan. Again, we're coming to the close of our time together. and some resources for you. Michael's over at a company called Chili Piper. Sales Class is an online platform with about 3,000 different sales training videos. Inside Sales by Design, huge fan of Gong for sales coaching. Michael, a little bit about Chili Piper, please.
Yes, so we are a meeting lifecycle automation. So we help with your meeting scheduling all across your revenue cycle. So from marketing all the way down through post sales.
Nice. Love it. I would highly recommend checking out Chili Piper for sure. Everybody loves it. I have yet to hear anybody who say, wow, I'm going to go back to Calendly. So if you, it's a very, very powerful platform that can help and get rid of the inefficiency, right, of back and forth and so much more than that. So thank you so much for joining us today. You'll see some follow up from myself as well as Michael. Please feel free to reach out directly to us, connect with us on LinkedIn if we're not already connected, email questions. We're here to help, right? A rising tide raises all boats is the phrase I think that we all live by these days. Michael, any parting thoughts?
Um, I think like in order to like for us to be like good coaches, we have to be like good students ourselves. So that's always the thing that I recommend. Like grab books on a topic, like reach out to revenue leaders, constantly stay in that space of learning ourselves, and then we'll be able to elevate our teams as well.
I agree. I agree. Well, thank you so much for joining today, Michael. It's always such a pleasure to talk with you. I appreciate it. I
Yes,
hope,
thank you.
thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And everybody, you go ahead and feel free to disengage and on to your next part of your day. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.